Hey everyone, welcome back to IGA Revision. In today's class, we'll talk about the types of tissue, but more importantly, muscle tissue. So, before discussing muscle tissue, let's talk about the four main types of tissue. Now, your body has different types of tissue and it's categorized into four different types. The first and the most profoundly found in your body is called the epithelial tissue. Its job is to cover and protect your cells. Now, an example of this is your skin. Your skin is covered with epithelial tissue. Now, we'll talk about this in a separate video because epithelial tissues have a lot of different types and it is a whole different topic. So, moving on, the second type is called the nervous tissue. And from its name, nervous tissue is involved with cells that transfer nervous signals. Now, these nerve signals are called impulses, and we'll talk about this when we come to the nervous system. And the third type is called the connective tissue. And from its name, you can see that connective tissue connects different types of tissues together. And this is one of the first tissues that is formed after your embryo is formed. And finally, the last one is the muscle tissue, which is covering your muscle cells. And this is what we'll discuss in today's class. So, there are three different types of muscle tissues. The first one, which is the most commonly used tissue, is the skeletal muscle. Now, the skeletal muscle, from its name, is a muscle tissue that is attached to the skeleton. And remember that it is voluntary, meaning you have some control of skeletal muscle. When you want to contract your arms, you can do that because skeletal muscle is voluntary. And skeletal muscle is involved with movement as well. And it is striated. I'll talk about this in a moment, but these are the characteristics of skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is also the subject to fatigue. Now, what is fatigue? Fatigue is when your body or your muscles cannot get enough calcium ions and therefore cannot contract. Why is that? Well, first of all, remember that sodium ions, when they enter the muscle cell, causes calcium 2 plus ion channels to open. And when this opens, calcium ions flow into the muscle cell and attaches to troponin, which causes muscle contraction. But when there is too much muscle contraction going on, sodium and as well as potassium, because remember, it is called a sodium potassium pump, not just a sodium pump. The sodium potassium pump is causing sodium ions to move in and potassium ions to move out. But remember that this whole system is not 100% efficient. This is not 100% efficient, meaning that some sodium or potassium is lost to other cells. This means that you will not have unlimited supply of sodium. So eventually, sodium and potassium ions lose out from this entire cell, and your muscle becomes a lot harder to contract. But when you rest for some time, then your body can get its sodium and potassium back from other parts of your body. So if this is the cell, then some sodium and potassium can enter the cell from a different part of the body, and then you can start your muscle contraction without any problems. This is also the reason it is recommended to take a break between between sets. So that is why you have sets of 3 and you take like 15 to 1 minute 1 minute to 15 seconds breaks between sets. So skeletal muscle, remember, is the subject to fatigue as well as cardiac muscle. But cardiac muscle has a lot more sodium and potassium pumps compared to your skeletal muscle, because cardiac muscle will always be contracting no matter what. If it stops, your body basically dies because of no contraction of cardiac muscle. So the second type of muscle tissue is your smooth muscle, and smooth muscle, remember, is an involuntary muscle, meaning you have no control over your smooth muscle. You can't just tell your smooth muscle to stop contracting and it will not stop, because this is an involuntary muscle. You have no control over your smooth muscle, and it is non-striated. And remember that it has no sarcomere, but it has actin and myosin. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my previous video where I talked about actin and myosin. Finally, the third type of muscle tissue is the cardiac muscle. Now, the cardiac muscle, from its name, is found in the heart, and again, it is involuntary because you cannot tell your cardiac muscle to stop and it won't stop, because cardiac muscle is involuntary. You have no control over it. It is also uninucleated, meaning it has single nucleuses and it is striated. And remember that there are striated and unstriated muscles in your body. Striated basically means that it is striped when looked under a microscope. It has stripes. And striated muscles are generally multinucleated. And they are attached to bones by tendons, and muscle fiber is made of myofibrils. Remember that skeletal muscles are striated. Cardiac muscle is striated as well, and smooth muscle is not striated, meaning it is non-striated. So when you look at smooth muscle under a microscope, you'll just see this instead of many different type of stripes. And this was basically the muscle tissue.